Academy!
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to What's Important Now, the podcast from the United States Border Patrol Academy. I want to talk a little bit about more than just the Border Patrol. I want to talk about our parent agency. We are actually part of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which falls under the Department of Homeland Security. Now, CBP, as it's known, actually encompasses around 60,000 employees, and many of us are frontline operational personnel. But that doesn't just include the Border Patrol. There are actually other operational components that help do this job of keeping this country and its people safe from people on the outside bringing in bad things or people that intend to do us harm. The U.S. Border Patrol is responsible for the area between the ports of entry. You see us out on patrol every day in green and white vehicles, but there's also another piece of our border, and that is our ports of entry. And through our ports of entry, we have lawful trade and travel, which is a big part of our economy. But we also have people that try and sneak in through those ports of entry as well. Well, who's responsible for making sure those ports of entry are safe and secure? That is our Office of Field Operations. And so today, I have with me the Executive Director of the Field Operations Academy, my counterpart, the one that trains every CBP officer that's assigned to a port of entry, whether it be land, sea, or air. His name is Chris Holtzer. Chris, thanks for being here.
Chief, thanks a ton for having me. It's been an outstanding visit. Great to finally make it out here after all this time and see what you and the team are doing. It's just outstanding.
It's been a long time coming, I know it's reciprocated because I got the chance to go out to your academy also and see what that was about, and it's an amazing operation. The sheer number of people that you put through every single year.
Well, thank you.
I'm jealous. I want to tell you a little bit about Director Holtzer and his career before we get started. So, Director Holtzer started with the U.S. Customs Service, and I'll talk about that in a second, in 2000. He started off in Chicago, Illinois, and he ultimately promoted to a Supervisory CBP Officer. Some of his accolades: he's been with the Office of Training Development several times. He was the Acting Assistant Director for the Use of Force Training Branch. He also served as the Deputy Commander for CBP's Quick Reaction Force. He was the National Commander for CBP's SRT team until landing about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. Yep. As the director and ultimately executive director of the Field Operations Academy, which is a senior executive service assignment.
It is.
So you've had quite the illustrious career.
Thank you.
And so he started off at the Customs Service, not CBP, and I'm going to let him tell you why that is. Tell us a little bit about how you started and how it morphed into CBP for you.
So when I started back in 2000, you had U.S. Customs Service and the Immigration and Naturalization Service. Essentially, for some that remember, it was the white shirts and the blue shirts when you went to a port of entry, right? And the immigration folks typically focused on admissibility of aliens and persons. The customs folks typically focused on merchandise, goods, narcotics, all that stuff. And so when 9/11 happened, obviously things changed substantially. And one of the things that came out of that, obviously, was the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And from there also was the creation of Customs and Border Protection, which essentially merged all that stuff together. So what was the Immigration Naturalization Service and the Customs Service merged, essentially become one. And so those inspectors all became CBP officers. And so now they do essentially, we used to, I think originally the moniker they gave them was super officers, is what they called them in the very beginning, right? Where they could do everything. They were essentially supposed to be experts in everything. And there was some trials and tribulations, of course, of the evolution of that, but we've come a long way. And so now when you go to a port of entry, it's essentially all blue shirts now, but yet they're doing all those same functions that always have existed. And it really was all morphed from 9/11.
And I remember that. I bet there's fewer and fewer people that remember what that was like, what you're talking about. But you would go to a port of entry, and you had people in uniforms that had white shirts with an immigration badge, and I think it was black pants or dark blue. And they did all the immigration inspections, stamping visas, checking passports and everything. And then you had these guys who were in uniforms, much like what you're wearing today. They were blue. They were customs inspectors, and they were taking cars apart. They were looking for narcotics and enforcing all manner of customs laws. Each of those very profound set of laws to enforce.
Absolutely.
And when they combined everybody together, I remember being on the sidelines in the Border Patrol looking and saying, I'm glad I don't have to do that, because that's a lot to have to remember and digest. When you said super officers, yes, I know exactly what you were talking about. So many different laws to enforce at those ports of entry.
Oh, yeah. It was funny, actually. One of our graduates we just had today, his father was here and is a chief in Detroit. Ran into him just a few minutes ago, and we were talking about Detroit. So back then, I'd done some stints in Detroit. So it was so disparaged that your border crossing lanes, it was maybe, I don't remember how many booths there were, let's say a dozen. The last 4 or 5, all white shirts. The other 7, all blue shirts. When you went inside, secondary was its own thing for the white shirts, secondary was its own thing for the blue shirts. And obviously they got along for the most part, right? Had their own issues, but it was completely separate. They had their own chains of command. They never reported to the same people anywhere in that chain. And it was really interesting.
And see, that's a good demonstration of how siloed things were prior to 9/11, and one of the reasons why CBP was formed, and we became what we became, because we had to start working together, because border security, national security is very much a team effort.
Absolutely.
And so we refer to those as legacy agencies that were brought in and ultimately became what CBP is today. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our brothers and sisters in tan. That's the Office of Air and Marine Operations, is the other operational component. The ones that you will see in uniform are basically one of those 3: the U.S. Border Patrol, the Office of Field Operations, and Air and Marine Operations. And so here you are with us today. Talk a little bit about when 9/11 happened and they stood up the Department of Homeland Security and we became one CBP. How was that transitioning from just customs enforcement to now you had to take on the immigration aspect? What was that change like?
It was challenging for certain. A lot at that time on the immigration side felt it was a hostile takeover by customs, and some acted like that, right? Yeah. Obviously, others played team ball as well. Just like anything else, you can have your disagreements and whatnot. But it was really challenging. I often say, so you're going back, that was 2003 is when it was created, March 2003. So we're on over 18 years. I think for a long time we didn't do very well. I think now in the last 5 or 10 years, though, we've really come a long way, and it goes back to what you're talking about with the partnerships and relationships and people realizing that, man, if we actually just work together, and instead of trying to silo and say, this is mine, you stay away. And I think across the government we've done that. That's probably the biggest thing. But again, I really think that, to me, where I've seen it in the last 5 or 10 years or so, we've really done that. So now we've actually evolved where the capabilities we have are just incredible. As CBP, but bigger, broader government-wise, because we work together with all of our other partners within the Department of Justice, and everybody else. So it's come a long way. It's been a long time, but
it has. But it's a generational change. It's not something that was expected to happen overnight, but to kind of set the stage for where we came from. We were completely different departments.
Absolutely.
I was over with INS under Border Patrol under the Department of Justice,
right.
Department of Treasury from U.S. Customs. An entirely different skill set, an entirely different way of doing business, an entirely different department, an entirely different culture. And literally from one day to the next, we were thrown together.
Right.
I think it's natural to see that it was going to take some speed bumps along the way and some trials and tribulations. But look at what we've become today, and look how massive CBP is, and how critical our mission is, specifically at the ports of entry. And a lot of people don't know this, but CBP does more than just enforce laws at our border. They also facilitate lawful trade and travel. A huge chunk of what you do at the ports of entry deals with our economic prosperity as a country.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's one of those things, in fact, it's one of our priorities for the Office of Field Operations, but it's one that I don't want to say people tend to overlook, but sometimes people, especially the officer ranks, get focused on I want to find the bad guys, I want to find the bad stuff, but realistically not understanding how detrimental a disruption to that economic system is huge. If our borders are shut down, if our borders don't run the way they're supposed to, and we don't facilitate that lawful trade and travel, so it does make it a challenging job too, right? I always like to say it's we're looking for a needle in a haystack, right? We're looking for the bad people and the bad things, but we got to juggle that mission of facilitating that lawful trade and travel. It's hugely critical to this country.
And I don't know if it's still true or not, but at one time CBP was the second largest revenue generator.
I believe that's still the case. Yeah, I believe that's still the case. Behind, of course, the IRS. But
exactly.
I hope we're liked a little more than them. I would hope. At least
I think
right
so
now.
too.
I would hope.
I think so too. So you got to experience it from the blue side and coming over, and I got to experience it from the green side coming over. And we came together, and then over time, we've taken down the silos, and we've actually seen CBP as an agency really start to take off. I think in large part because there's fewer and fewer people that remember what life was like prior to CBP. So that's what I mean by a generational change. But just for the fun of it, I want to go back to your customer service days. We were talking about this in my office a little bit ago. So your class, I asked you, well, what was your class number? And you said, didn't have one. That's not the way that it worked. What was it like for somebody that went through the Academy for the U.S. Customs Service?
So it was more of a collegial atmosphere. So it was, I'd actually been not long out of college when I went through, so it was very reminiscent. Now, that didn't no degradation of the training. The training was solid, and your defensive tactics was solid. Your mat room stuff was solid. Your PT was solid. Your firearms was solid. But it was sort of your administration of it was much more of a collegiate atmosphere versus a paramilitary type. We didn't have any drill and ceremony or marching around campus or cadences. None of that. So you might have had some cadences, maybe if you did a PT team run or something like that. But otherwise, it was very much, I don't want to even call it unregimented, but it was much like most other federal law enforcement academies are, where
focused more on the academic than the customs and courtesies and drill and ceremony.
Yes. Yeah, I would say more on less on the protocols and more on just the actual training itself.
And so how did that kind of morph? Because I know that's not the case for you guys today. You run a very tight ship over there at the
We do, and that's thanks to the Border Patrol. So back in 2009, we had our first ever director of the Field Operations Academy was a Border Patrol agent. So Kevin Strong, I'm sure you know well, was asked to be the director of the Field Operations Academy, and basically his charge was put some more discipline and put some more regimentation into it, and he sure did. So coming here and seeing what you guys are doing today, it's obviously very reminiscent of what we do as you saw. So it's come a long way. So back in 2009, that's Kevin Strong and his team got sort of the ball rolling, and then we've run with it since then, and it's really changed. So now the discipline, the professionalism, all that stuff that we really can build in there and mold in there and shape is really come a long way. And I think it's done a lot for what our graduates now display whenever they leave.
I'll even say that I think you've taken that and turbocharged it, because when I was there and I got to participate in one of your graduations, there's a tremendous amount of esprit de corps and motivation there that only comes from an atmosphere like that.
It does.
You guys have built off of it and just made it something special.
Thanks.
So what made you decide, okay, I'm going to go customs? I mean, you were up there in the Chicago area, and
no, actually, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. I was in Pittsburgh. I was actually my senior year of college, and I was studying in criminology, and so really just looking for jobs. I applied at a couple of police departments, and a vacancy came up. I don't remember what the heck the mechanism they even did back then was. I was back in about 98 or 99, so I don't remember how they even announced those things or not. Right, the internet was barely a thing then. So I applied. The process was really long, and it was funny because I actually got the offer for customs service on Tuesday, and an offer for the Pittsburgh Police Department on Thursday. And so I'd already accepted the customs one, and I said, well, heck, I guess I'll just go with that. So I already said yes. And I said, had it been reversed, I don't know, I might be a Pittsburgh cop right now. but just kind of interesting. And so by the time everything played out, I was maybe I was about 10 or 12 months out of college, and had a couple of jobs on the side, and so the timing's worked out well. It's a long process. It took me almost a year and a half or 2 years to get it.
That's so crazy to hear, because that's very true on the Border Patrol side as well. There's many of us that we just stumbled upon the job. We just stumbled upon the Border Patrol itself, and it sounds like the same was true for you. You just saw the opening, thought it looked fun, and applied.
Yep.
Oklahoma, where I came from, and the same thing. I knew nothing about the Border Patrol, and I did. I saw it online for what the dial-up modems would provide back in in the day, and I remember what you're talking about, downloading the OF612. That was the form that we had to fill out, and you could either type it out, or you could write it out by hand and send it in. And I remember they had an expedited hiring process back then, and because I was 20 years old and hadn't been outside of my hometown, my background took about 20 minutes, and so so I got through relatively quickly. But I heard a lot of people that it took a couple of years to get through the process.
That was kind of standard. Then it took a good year and a half, 2 years. I want to say I had applied in October, and UD'd the May of the following year. So a year and a half or so later, almost 2 years.
And so I think that's important for people to hear that are applying or going through the process right now. There are a lot of steps, and it does take time, so patience is key.
Absolutely. It absolutely is keys. And sometimes people get lucky, and like you're pointing, sometimes the backgrounds can go, excuse me, a little quicker and whatnot. But yeah, I think the standard these days, anywhere from heck 6 months to 2 years, and you're right, patience is definitely key.
And I always tell people that you go through one step and then you're waiting on the next one. It's best just to put it out of your mind and not dwell on it because you'll drive yourself crazy.
Absolutely.
And then you get the next step and you finish it and you put it out of your mind and just
Yep.
keep on keeping on. But the important thing is don't quit the job that you have,
Right.
and in anticipation, wait until you actually have that offer.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So for somebody that, what type of person would be drawn to being a CBP officer?
So I think one of the best thing I could say is having an inquisitive mind, right? So it kind of mentioned, find that needle in the haystack, right? We talk to, or, you can call it interviewing if you want, but we talk to more people than any government agency that I can imagine, any federal law enforcement agency that I could even come up with, and part of that is we're trying to identify people's stories, and we're trying to find the holes in people's stories. We're trying to find the anomalies in people's stories to start to figure out, hey, maybe is this person doing something wrong? And now, if so, what? How do I start to pinpoint that? So having that inquisitive mind is probably one of the best things I could say for a trait to someone to have to want to do this, because it's finding a needle in a haystack, but when you find that needle, sure, it's fun.
I would think dealing with people is having good people skills is important as well.
Absolutely. We tell people, we tell our officers, I mean, again, the majority of the people they're going to deal with are absolutely law-abiding, good people, and they typically are the first person that someone sees when they enter this country, and especially if that's someone from a foreign country, they're the first impression they get of our country, right? So we definitely want to make sure that that's a positive imprint that's left on those travelers.
Especially when you consider the majority of the folks that you deal with are good people.
Vast majority.
Yeah, they're
Vast
coming
majority.
in, traveling for pleasure, for business, and
Yep.
and so yeah, we treat them with courtesy and respect always, and so you have to be able to ask those questions in a way that is not off-putting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even when you find the bad guy, you still put that on the trainees now. I don't care if they're arresting the biggest bad guy they ever have. They still do it as a professional, right? And you still treat people with respect.
Yep, I couldn't have said that better. So I want to switch to a topic real quick because I know all the folks in Border Patrol are going to find this interesting. We see the ranks on the collars, on the epaulets, and we know what ours are.
Right.
But it doesn't directly translate. There's different names and different. So let's go through the ranks real
Okay.
quick. So for somebody in the Border Patrol that is wearing the 2 bars, the captain's bars, if they were in the military, that's our first line supervisor. I see folks with epaulets that look like the warrant officer. What are they?
So that is that's a journeyman officer. So
Okay.
so that's a journeyman officer, GS-12. So
Mhm.
once you progress to a GS-12 as a journeyman, you are the journeyman bar, we call it.
Okay.
And then next from that would be a first line supervisor, and those are the gold cluster oak leaf.
Gold cluster. So for us, that would be a special operations supervisor,
Right.
which is a form of second line supervisor
Okay.
for us.
Okay.
So then let's switch to the silver oak leaf. For us, would be a watch commander or
Okay.
a deputy patrol agent in charge.
All right. So for us, that would be a chief CBP officer. So also a GS-13, but a second line supervisor.
And so what do they do? What is?
So a chief, and that's changed a little bit because now we've implemented a watch commander position as well. So back in the field, I spent a pretty long stint as a chief before I left the field, and so for instance, in my case, I was in charge of passport control operations. So essentially the immigration side of things, which was pretty fun because I
You
barely
weren't
knew what a
immigration.
passport was. I sure wasn't. I still remember when the assistant port director called me and said, "Hey, I want you to do an assignment up in passport control," and I put the phone away and picked it back up. I said, "You sure, Larry? You want me?" And he said, "Absolutely." I said, "Well, I'm on it.
Yeah.
I'm in," and it was a great experience. So that's typically they would have, I would have had daily oversight of 15,000 people traveling through our port of entry.
So not necessarily a specific unit or group, or yes?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Again, one of my counterparts was in charge of what we called our roving teams and our passenger analysis unit, kind of our intel shop, right? So that was his role, right? And so another one would be over baggage control, which again, back to your legacy customs functions. So kind of like the OIC for each respective larger group.
Area or task,
Mhm.
or because for us, a watch commander would be over a unit or a shift at a station, and of course, the deputy patrol agent in charge would be the number 2 person at a station. So then moving on to the Eagles, which would be like a colonel
Mhm.
in the military, for us is either a patrol agent in charge of a station, or an executive officer, or an assistant chief patrol agent.
Okay. And so that's where ours get a little confusing because ours kind of align not just to position but also to grade.
Mhm.
So, for instance, Oakley for us is across the board at GS-14.
Okay.
So GS-14, first level would be a watch commander. So the watch commanders now, again, if those have been implemented, are kind of similar to your point. That might be someone that's over it's going to be over all the chiefs, all maybe on a shift over that whole operation. Depending on the size of the port, that could be a port director. So some of our ports are run by GS-14s, obviously based on their size and scope. Others are GS-15s, and others are SESs. So it really varies on the size and scope and how that port is rated. But a 14 for us could be a lot of different things. Could be an assistant port director if the port director is GS-15, or a watch commander.
So at that point, it's based on grade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which does get kind of confusing. It's always something that's confusing. You guys definitely, I think, do a little more streamlined of a job of aligning it to the job versus the job and grade. Yeah. Right. Ours is kind of tied to the grade first.
So for us, somebody that's wearing the Eagles could be a 14 or a 15.
Okay.
And then somebody that's wearing the silver oak leaf, mostly 14s, but potentially could be a 13 as well. And then from there, the gold oak leaves and the double bars are 13.
Okay.
And so then we move up to having 1 star on their collar, and in military parlance would be a brigadier general.
Okay.
But for us, that's either going to be a division chief at a sector, it's going to be an associate chief at headquarters, or it's going to be a deputy chief of a sector, deputy chief patrol agent. And that could either be a 15 or an SES.
Okay. So ours, again, goes back to first and foremost, going to be GS-15. So anything GS-15 is going to wear the single star. And again, depending on the size, if it's a larger, a medium-sized port, I'll call it, it would be that'd be the port director. If it were a larger port where the port director was an SES, that would be one of your assistant port directors. Or at a field office level, it could even be one of the assistant directors of the field operations over the whole region.
Okay. And real quick before, in case there's anybody that's wondering, so when we're talking about the GS scale, that's the pay scale in the federal government, so the general schedule, and we're talking about all the way up to the 15 level, that's as high as it goes, and then you enter in what's called the senior executive service, which is above the GS pay scale. So when we're saying SES, that's what we're talking about. So then we're moving up to 2 stars, what you and I have. And so for us, that means a chief patrol agent of a sector or a chief of a directorate up at headquarters, and that can be a 15. Usually it's a senior executive service member.
So for us, the 2 stars would be exclusively to senior executive service, which would be either, again, those larger ports, director of field operations, which is over a field office, again, a larger region, or in headquarters, executive directors.
Okay. And then we only have 1 3-star, which is the deputy chief of the Border Patrol, and we only have 1 4-star, that is the chief, our B1.
Same thing for us. So we have the executive assistant commissioner is the 4-star, and the deputy executive assistant commissioner is the 3-star. Only have 1 of each, and so they oversee collectively the 30,000 employees for field operations.
And I know there's been some folks that may have seen other 4-star Border Patrol agents out there, and for example, acting deputy commissioner CBP Kari Huffman, he is an executive assistant commissioner over enterprise services. He still wears his uniform as a Border Patrol agent, and because he's at that level of the chief of the Border Patrol, he still wears 4 stars. I know we've had some of those also with OFO as well.
We have, the last sitting deputy commissioner, Mr. Perez, was also the same as both the deputy but prior he was another executive assistant commissioner in operations support, and he did the same. He wore the blue uniform with 4 stars.
Okay, and then let's break down the kind of the geographic areas for us. So for Border Patrol, we have, of course, the headquarters element, and we have 20 geographic sectors that divide up the country that each have a multitude of stations within them. And in addition to those 20 sectors, we have the Special Operations Group, and we have the Border Patrol Academy. All of those have a chief patrol agent commanding that report to the headquarters element in Washington, D.C. What's it like for?
Pretty similar. We have, for simplicity's sake, we have 18 field offices, which again are just like the sectors in a Border Patrol, where they're over a region, a larger region, and that varies again in size and scope and personnel. For instance, it's funny, kind of when you look at one of our maps, our field offices, the Seattle field office covers like almost the entire northern border, and I forget how many employees they have. Let's just, for argument's sake, say it's 1,000 across the entire northern border. And you look at San Diego, which looks like a pinprick on the map, and they've got about 2,000 or more employees. But again, I don't know the exact numbers these days, but yeah, the size and scope. So then within those 18 field offices, there's 328 ports of entry. So then, as you mentioned earlier, land, air, or sea, in those many different sizes, many different shapes, many different places. So all over the country.
So you could be a director of field operations and potentially have a land port, more than one land port. You could have airports, you could have seaports.
Absolutely.
And I imagine those are very different to operate.
Oh, completely. I mean, the core the core mission is all the same, right? But what you're doing, I mean, you're going to go to a seaport. We have a super freighter coming in with thousands of containers that we've got to scan, using various non-intrusive methods, using our intelligence capabilities versus a land border like San Isidro that's got, they've actually added more lanes since last time I've been there, but massive, right? Or even some smaller places where our officers have to be more jacks of all trades, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very diverse, very, very diverse.
So if a person worked at a sector that had both a land port and an airport, could they bounce between the two and work at?
They're all run differently, but yes, some do. Some staff, both operations out of the same place. Sometimes, depending on how they're set up, they might have. You might bid for this year. You're bidding for just the airport, and next year I might bid just for the land border. So it just all depends on each individual sector, how they're field office, how they're set up, or how each port is set up.
I'm trying to equate it to if you were assigned to a station that had checkpoint operations and line watch, you could get assigned either or. But are the ports more like stations where if you're assigned to that airport, you're not going to go to this land port?
Not necessarily for on day to day, let's say, but that might be our bid. And each year with our how it works is you bid for your assignment, right? And so typically based on seniority. So it might be for this year, I might work at that particular airport, and maybe next year I bid something different. I might work at that particular border crossing.
So a lot of diversity of work.
Oh, absolutely.
No way to get bored.
Yeah. No, right. Always, that's something I tell the trainees. I said, always go for something different. Always go. Our job is so diverse in the things that we do. Right. If you're getting stale on something, you're just not taking the time to go find something new.
Well, and then much like us, you have K9, you have intel, you have training, you have special operations. There's take your pick, and then you also have, oh, by the way, passenger, cargo, you name it. It's so a person can really just bounce around and basically not do the same thing one year to another till they're retired.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially if we're willing to actually move between region and region. My gosh, you could do something different constantly. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Now, how frequently does a person move in OFO?
Just whatever that's really up to that particular person, right? It's we always tell people, right? I tell people early, obviously the more you're willing to move, the more opportunities you have, and whether that be to rise in the ranks, that's something that someone desires, or to your point, just to get some diversity in what I do. But you also can stay in the same port of entry your entire term.
And people do.
Absolutely do. And that's what I tell them too. I said, don't, always look at what fits your situation, your family, your life, your desires. A lot of people born and raised in one area, don't have any reason to leave there. That's where their roots are, and that's perfect for them. Others,
well, and I'm sure you have them also. We have people that are coming from the military that have been bounced around like a basketball for for their entire career, and the last thing they want to do when they come to us is continue to move around.
Right.
And they can be the best Border Patrol agents we've ever had and stay in that same spot and be just fine.
I always say it's still one of the best people I've ever worked with. She retired a couple of years ago as a journeyman. And she, all in the same port, 35 years. One of the most impressive people I've ever worked with. She could have been the commissioner of CBP if she wanted to, but that was her where it fit her life and fit her role. And
she was happy.
She was absolutely happy. Absolutely happy. Just a great person, great worker, great everything.
Awesome. Well, I want to talk about your career a little bit, because you did some bouncing around. How many moves have you made?
Well, only officially, I guess this last one would be my third. But I also in there, and instead of moving when I went from Harper's Ferry at our advanced training center to DC, I elected not to move. Instead, I did a 2-hour and some change commute each way every day. So I probably should have moved on that one. But
I still want to call everybody's attention to the fact he said only 3 times, as if that's nothing major. Yeah. And most times when people have a career, they don't have to move really at all.
Yeah.
But with us, that's not the case.
Right.
So you did, though. You did your share of moves, and I want to highlight a couple of them. So when it talks about that you went to work for the Office of Training and Development the first time, because we're part of Office of Training and Development right now under the academies, as the acting assistant director for the Use of Force Training Branch. What is that?
So that was a lot of fun. So that was in 2007. First, I went on a detail on a temporary assignment to Harper's Ferry in the Use of Force Training Branch. So that's where we in Harper's Ferry we train all of our instructors for the field. So in firearms and use of force or defensive tactics. So the particular use of force branch was the defensive tactics side. So every officer and agent in the field has to do quarterly training in use of force. And so what we did was we would bring the instructors in from all over the country and we train them. And what was really neat about it was, I went there as early as 2007. That's where we trained Border Patrol, Air and Marine, and Office of Field Operations folks, one and the same. Every class was typically actually literally divided up by, we would do 24 people. Typically it was 10 slots went to Border Patrol, 10 went to Field Operations, and 4 went to Air and Marine. So when we talk about things merged and us doing stuff together, I was doing it before it was a cool thing to do, right?
Well, and I want to kind of distill that down to the layperson speak, because that's a really monumental thing that you just talked about. So not only does every officer and agent have to train quarterly, which means 4 quarters in a year, 4 times a year, they have to train and be proficient in all of their use of force.
Mm-hmm.
And every instructor, whether it be green, blue, or tan, is trained to the same standard to teach the exact same product.
Absolutely. And in the field, in some places, they share the resources.
Yeah.
So if I'm at a particular Border Patrol station that maybe I'm thin in my in instructors, I may borrow some from Field Ops or from Air and Marine, and they come and teach my Border Patrol agents,
Mm-hmm.
or vice versa.
And all of us in uniform do that 4 times a year, every year, for the entirety of our career, no matter what we have on our collar or our shoulders, no matter what our job is.
Yep. And so it was a pretty neat place. Like I said, it was in 2007, really early in the merge. I can't remember what year we actually started doing that. What year was done? I think it was when the Advanced Training Center opened, 2005-ish or so. I can't remember the exact time frame, but yeah, so it was really early on that was being done.
And for those that don't know, so under the Office of Training and Development, so we have the academies, the basic training academies for the uniform components. We also have the advanced training facility that you're talking about in Harpers Ferry,
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia, so that those of us that are already in uniform, some of the advanced training for less lethal, for firearms,
Mm-hmm.
for leadership, you name it, that's where we go to get that training.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually a very complex network of training that keeps our men and women proficient throughout the course of their career, no matter what they're doing.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing thing when you think about it. But for an agency, 60+ thousand people, it's necessary.
It is.
So then, the deputy commander of CBP's Quick Reaction Force. Tell us what the Quick Reaction Force is and what that entails. What was the mission set?
So the mission set was essentially to support headquarters in a continuity of operations issue. We have a threat to the capital region, to our facilities in the capital region, or something of that nature, where we literally had to close or respond to something. And so, since we were stationed just outside of the capital region, about 60 miles or so, we happened to have a bunch of people on our staff that came from the OFO Special Response Team, and both the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, or BORTAC, and also the Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Team. So somewhere in there, we'd made some connections with some of our counterparts in headquarters, and they saw the value in having this group of folks out just outside the Beltway, and we formed a team, which was really the first, I think, still only truly integrated between the 3 different tactical units within CBP, and so I was fortunate of spending probably about a year or so as the deputy commander of it. So it was really interesting, neat thing to do.
And that was a national level team.
It was.
And this is one of the aspects of CBP that I think makes us appealing to partner with other law enforcement agencies. In terms of size, we dwarf everybody. There's no law enforcement organization that even comes close to more than 60,000 men and women. And so the manpower and the skill sets we can bring to bear to help any mission, that's why we're called upon. And you've seen us called upon in everything from riot response to hurricane response, mm-hmm. to helping out in events of national significance like the Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2002. So that's why it's not uncommon to see CBP being leveraged by our partner law enforcement agencies because of those things that we bring to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So now let's talk about the Special Response Team, because that's not only near and dear to your heart, but it's near and dear to my heart as well.
Absolutely.
So I've been a member of BORTAC and BORSTAR since 2001, and I know the skill set and the capabilities that brings to bear, that both teams bring to bear to the U.S. Border Patrol. What does OFO-SRT do for OFO?
Well, first I want to say I can only think of a few guys that I know of that can say they earned both of those tabs that you have. So that is and the ones that I can think of off the top of my head are impressive folks. So that is something to be said.
Well, I did it when I was too young to know any better.
So the Special Response Team was established in 2007, and at that time our leadership said that we were we were relying on others for too much. And so essentially, long story short, they went to BORTAC and said, make us our own team. And so a lot of your counterparts and your teammates essentially built a program modeled after the Border Patrol selection and assessment course, and built us our own. So in 2007, built that for us and ran it exclusively. By the time I got to go through in 2009, I was a member of class 6. It was the sixth time it was run. The attrition rate at that time was, class 5 had 0 graduates, but the attrition rate at that time was probably in about the 20% range of those that actually graduated. So 20% of those that showed up actually graduated. We were a little higher than that. We had 59 people show up in our class, and 19 graduated. And so 2009, by that point, really young. In fact, in my particular class, I think we only had 1 or 2 BORTAC cadre left. The rest actually were guys that had graduated from some of the previous classes. And so as time went on, we took over and ran it ourselves. And then I was really fortunate in 2014, I was asked to serve as the national commander for that. So I got to manage the national program. Time was probably about 80 operators, almost every field office. We haven't quite at every field office yet. And so it was really interesting. So it was, again, still even that time in 2014, we were only 7 years old, which was pretty massive. I think at that time, BORTAC was nearly 30 years old. So we learned a lot from them for certain.
Yeah. Well, and so I want to make sure everybody is following with us here. So when we say tactical unit, I guess the closest thing we can equate it to is if you're familiar with what a SWAT team is. So for a federal entity, the SRT or BORTAC for us, that's as close as we get to having a SWAT team. There's very similar mission sets. And so for somebody that's going to be an operator with OFO SRT, what are the basic requirements to be able to qualify?
So, physically wise, the physical requirements are actually pretty stringent. Pardon me. We have just your entry level to even just show up to the course is a mile and a half in 11 minutes. Did some changes recently. I think it's still 40 push-ups, and I think it's about 41 or 42 sit-ups in 1 minute. So pretty stringent. Like I tell all those that are interested, I said, unfortunately, that's got to be the easy part for you, because you want to prepare for that, so that's not something you have to worry about.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I had some folks with SOG and BORTAC and BORSTAR talk about the same things, and I want to make clear to everybody that's listening, that's not what it takes to get on the team.
Not at all.
That's what it takes to qualify to try out.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to do much better than that once you're there, and it's a selection course. So you're talking sleep deprivation.
Absolutely.
You're talking about being put out of your comfort zone. There's stress inoculation. Everything that goes into deciding if that person has what it takes to keep their cool, exercise good sound judgment, operate in a team environment in very dire circumstances.
Absolutely. And we spent a lot of time in the 4 years I spent leading the team. We spent a lot of time going and spending a lot of time with experts, not just BORTAC. We've done that for years, and we continue to do that. But we spent a lot of time with Special Forces assessment and selection in Fort Bragg. We spent a lot of time with the Air Force, SEERS, which are the survival, evasion. I can't remember what it stands for. But again, another special operations wings. And part of those relationships was we looked at how to evaluate and assess people better. And to your point of, it's like I always put it, is the candidates are being assessed every single minute of every single day. And that's how we evaluate them based on those core values and those characteristics that we're looking for that special operator. So we really came a long way. It started in the early days as more of a, I don't want to call it a tough guy course, right? If you could stick it out, but
they all do.
Yeah, they all do. And we realized that wasn't the best way to do it. That's part of it, of course, right? But the other part of it is that assessment piece and the evaluation of those folks. We really came a long way. So I'm really proud of what the guys are doing now. They've carried on since I've gone too, and they've made it even better. So it's pretty awesome.
And so what would be a typical mission for OFO SRT?
So one of the big ones, obviously, at our land borders is the port hardening and response to border violence. Beyond that, we've evolved over the years. A lot of it has been working with our other counterparts and other agencies for that broader border security missions. And then a lot of the teams have actually gotten into sort of working their own really what I'll call different out of the box missions, where some were doing surveillance operations of suspected border crossers, conducting some different things. I know our guys in Buffalo had taken down some pretty cool drug smuggling rings. Just again, kind of working outside the box, which is really cool.
That sounds like fun. I mean, I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
Yeah. So OFO is now a law enforcement entity in that it is covered the same as the Border Patrol, what we call 6C coverage. So that means you do get the special law enforcement retirement package when you come on board with OFO.
We do. The only difference is we don't officially have. It's not officially 60. There's a couple of different cases or laws that give us that same coverage. So ours is actually called the CBP Enhanced Retirement.
Okay.
The benefits are exactly the same, one and the same. It's the retire at 20 years and 50 years or 50 years old or 25 years in any age. Same thing. We get 1.7% on our retirement versus the 1% that a conventional GS employee gets. But it's exactly the same. So yeah, that happened in 2008. Was when that became effective. So us, well, I guess I'll say old timers now. We were all grandfathered into it. So I don't have a mandatory retirement date. So now when the new folks come in, they've got to mandatorily retire by 57. But us folks that were all in before 2008 could really go as long as we wanted, which is kind of interesting. I'm not saying I want to.
No, but I mean, you don't have a mandatory retirement date, but you're able to retire a lot sooner and with much better benefits.
A lot sooner. Yeah, I'll be able to retire essentially 6 years sooner than I would have. With about let's call it about 7 or 8% more on my retirement than I would have had I to stick around those extra 6 years.
So you're starting to see a lot of similarities and a lot of parity and a lot more blending across the operational components within CBP, and it's been amazing to see that transformation really in less than 20 years. What we've seen happen, amazing to see what happens in the next 20, 40 years, long after you and I have already moved on to green pastures, hopefully.
Yeah, it will. I think we started to see that what special skills each of our folks have, and realized though how those skills were actually needed on the other side too. And I saw that in some of your training event venues you have here, where some of your team was explaining to me how we actually went to OFO and learned how to do this thing, and this is what we built, and this is what we're training all of our agents in now. Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah, and when you break down those silos and you actually work together, you start to see the opportunities, and everybody is made better. And that's been a great thing to see. And I did want to talk about that a little bit, because now that we have been part of CBP and we've started to do joined and integrated operations, and we've helped each other out across the board, whether it be with the migrant surges and the handling of that, or even our targeted enforcement, how we leverage each other to go after those networks and those organizations that are responsible for the illicit traffic coming across. And it has been an amazing thing to see what we each bring to bear in terms of the analysis and the intelligence that's gathered and everything. And I think that CBP probably has the market cornered when it comes to some of these areas, not just because of our size, but because of the skill set and the capabilities that we bring to bear. And we've only seen that since those silos came down.
Yeah, that's exactly. And the opportunities we've done now to expand to your point. Yeah, what's the next 20 or 40 years going to bring? I think it's going to be pretty awesome stuff.
I do too. Well, if a person wants to apply for the Office of Field Operations, talk a little bit how they do that.
So, typically the announcements are open pretty frequently. I'm not sure exactly the tempo, but they'll be open on usajobs.gov, and that's the starting point, right? And so the process is again, has a lot of steps to it, as you mentioned earlier. The first part is going on that USA Jobs and filling out that application questionnaire. I'm not sure the exact order these days, but typically after that, it's a written test you get scheduled for. Somewhere in there will be a structured interview, a polygraph examination, background investigation, medical screening, and some other stuff. So yeah, the step-by-step can be a lengthy process, but we've gotten way more efficient at it over the years, and our hiring pipeline runs pretty well these days. We did, in fact, this year we did a record number of trainees at 2,256. We did this past year.
That came through your academy.
That came through. It started not necessarily all graduated, of course. We would love to see that, but
Absolutely.
2,256 showed up for the first day of class.
And that's so same benefits, same veterans preference, those that qualify, and the same law enforcement coverage. So, and then you still have to go to an academy, your academy, and very similar in structure to ours, different mission sets and whatnot. But it's really just take your pick.
That's it.
Do you want to do the Border Patrol job, or do you want to do field operations job? Both are on the front line, keeping this country safe.
Yeah, both work together to again, we cover the ports of entry, you cover all the places in the middle between those, and collectively we protect the front line.
Yep, and we were talking about this earlier because we're both standing on stage. Class 1170 graduated today, and so Director Holtzer was our special guest speaker.
Thanks again for that. That was pretty awesome.
We were glad to have you. And then Deputy Chief of Big Bend Sector Rogo was there also. and just happened. I lost count, maybe 12 people pinning badges.
That was a lot.
And so, and all 12 of them were either Border Patrol agents or CBP officers. And so we had CBP officers pinning their children as Border Patrol agents. And I'm sure you have it vice versa at your academy as well. So you talk about that legacy, and it's starting not to matter, which agency or which component you go to. It's all the same.
Yeah, it actually is. It's pretty cool. And to your point, now I don't think we ever had quite that many we had today. That was pretty awesome. But yeah, typically in a graduation, obviously we probably have 2 or 3 CBP officers and 2 or 3 Border Patrol agents that are there. And you're right, the Border Patrol agents are pinning their newly trained CBP officer children, or sometimes siblings, sometimes cousins, sometimes nephews or nieces, and it's pretty neat.
And I use the term children loosely because no mistake about it, they've proven themselves and then some. But I do get it because it seems like they get younger and younger the more time goes on. And
I think we're just getting older and older.
Yeah, that too.
That's part of it.
But it's a good thing to see. It's been really good. So you got the entire CBP population out there listening, and their families. Any words of wisdom you want to give to them about what we've been going through these past 18 months, 2 years with the COVID environment?
It's been tough. It's been tough all around, right? I think we're up to. I think the commissioner said the other day we lost our 53rd person to COVID. Terrible, right? I mean, and these are people that have been essential to the mission, right? We haven't been able to shut the borders down. The borders don't shut down, right? Our folks had to be out there working throughout all this. We've had to be here training. You have had to be training here. We've had to be training over in Glynco this whole time. Why? Because we got to fill the holes of the folks that retire or move on to other positions. And so, we've had to train. It's been tough. It's been, the trainees on both of our sides have been through a lot, right? They've been locked on base for long periods of time by FLETC and some other different things. And it's been tough. So and the stresses from just COVID itself. We've had I think we're well over 300 cases of COVID we've had at just our academy, and I can say that I only had to send one person home because of COVID, and I'm really excited to say that he just had a really rough go of things, but I just got word today that he's healed up and might be cleared for full duty by the end of this month, and we'll try to get him back in. And he only had a few weeks left of training to go. So
that's great news. And I'll tell you what, one of the things that I want to point out, and I'm sure you'll back me up on this, I saw the desire and the enthusiasm and the esprit de corps in our trainees just by watching what they went through to stick it out and graduate. We had folks, some of the classes were here for the better part of a year. For a lot of that time, they were locked down on this base and not allowed to leave. They were getting tested on a regular basis, wearing masks 24/7, it felt like. Restricted movements. They gutted it out, and they still finished, and they're out there today on patrol. That speaks volumes for their dedication. Just imagine that dedication being applied to this mission.
Oh, it is, and I'll tell you. So, and I don't know how to even explain this still, but our attrition, or those that leave without graduating from the academy, essentially was cut in half during COVID, which is incredible, right? You would think, based on the environment, the things you just mentioned, you'd think it would be double, triple, quadruple what it would. It actually was cut in half, and that again goes back to the dedication of the men and women and what they've gone through, and we saw that teamwork element that we both garner so much in both of our sites, but the teamwork was just incredible, and I hope I'm confident that they're all taking that back out to the field and taking that same attitude and that same motivation.
I've seen it time and time again. I know you have too, but sometimes in the worst tragedy and crisis, you also get to see the best of humanity. And I think that's been the case here and continues to be the case as we continue to navigate this COVID pandemic and hopefully start to put it in the rear view. But the mission continues. It doesn't matter what we do. It's out there each and every day. I'm proud to be a part of this, and I'm proud to call you and all your brothers and sisters, my brothers and sisters as well. I wish you the best, Director Holtzer. I cannot thank you enough for coming out here and gracing us with your presence today and talking to the men and women of Class 1170. Appreciate it.
Chief, the sentiment is exactly the same, and I again really appreciate the invite and being out here. It was great. It was outstanding. Great to be part of the graduation, doing the run with you guys yesterday was pretty awesome. So thanks again.
Thank you, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for another episode of What's Important Now. You stay safe out there. Keep your heads up. Honor first.